Everybody, welcome. This is fun. I'm excited to hang out with you today on this little UI reproduction challenge that we're gonna do. Jacob hit me up about this, and just we had some like good chats about it, and I thought like, well, why not just do it? I think it'd probably benefit everyone if we kind of like walked through the process and talked through some of the details of kind of our thinking and whatnot, and just had a conversation around this piece of code, or piece of UI. So as we do this, it's not rude to interrupt or add questions or whatever, unless you do it rudely, then it is rude. But questions are welcome and encouraged, and this is very much a learning process. We have not kind of like, I mean, he's worked on this, but we've not done a lot of like, thinking about this beforehand, because we want it to be a very raw kind of process where like you get this code challenge and you got to do it. Kind of what are some of those steps that you take to kind of do it efficiently and effectively? Jacob, would you like to introduce yourself and just kind of like tell us about yourself and maybe a little bit about this challenge and kind of how you experienced it?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Jacob Roman, and I mostly work in the front end. I've dabbled in the back end a little bit, but I went to school for design, so I actually prefer to work on the front end a lot more. And yeah, so I came across this, and I built it out there. The company sent me a Figma file and was like, here you go, you have 24 hours. And I just hammered it out the best to my knowledge. I actually have a starter that I used on my own. It's like a Gatsby, what was it? It was Gatsby, TypeScript, and Tailwind that I used. Mm-hmm. And I just went for it. And it was a real struggle for me at first, because it was just like, it was really bad timing, and I didn't know the best approach to take as far as like, should I just turn it in at 34 hours or and it didn't even dawn on me to even ask for like extra time, or like, hey, this is really bad time. So yeah,
that's interesting. No, keep going.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say it's a neat little app, and it is funny when you tackle something like this, how you kind of notice like why this was made a challenge, because it's like there's little nuances that you notice. Like for example, you'll see there's the list of movies that should have been cut off with like the ellipses. Yeah. Right there, the third one down, Harry Potter, it has the ellipses, and that's something that I overlooked building it out. So
yeah, it is really interesting. I feel like so I have been able to, I guess, administer a couple of these challenges before, and it is interesting how they look so simple. Like a lot of them have kind of a trick in there, or a trick or two, and they look so simple, and then you get into them and there's all these like subtleties that that take a lot of work to actually like work through. So yep. This is the Figma file that you sent to me. Is this or it's modified? I think I removed some of the frames, but is this kind of what was sent to you?
Yeah, that's exactly what was sent.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I'm curious, who else has had experience, doing a design role, kind of having a challenge like this, where it was kind of, you had to like recreate something, and it could just be maybe like more of a code type challenge as well. But like, who's had experience with this type of thing, like a timed, get back to us with this thing done?
Sounds like a regular work task for me.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, and that's a really interesting point. Like, I think a lot of times if you're, in design, like you might actually have a card that just has this screenshot on there, and your job is to kind of implement it or whatnot. So, interview or not, this feels like a kind of a pretty good thing to do.
I was lucky with my latest projects. I was getting Adobe XD or Scratch designs.
Yeah.
Everything, all the tools that's there.
Yeah, and it's nice because I think, as these tools progress, there's a lot of things that you get in terms of, you click on these and you see all of the dimensions and you see the, the colors and whatnot, which is awesome and so much more high fidelity than what we've, had in the past with just like screenshots.
Yeah.
So Jacob,
I have a tiny ruler app. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no.
I used to measure it with this desktop ruler, and then now you just like press Control and see all the dimensions on those tools.
That's awesome. I love that. I have one of those too. It feels like it's becoming less and less that I need it, which is great. Okay, so Jacob, I'm curious, what were some of as we kind of jump into coding this up, so we have the time frame is 24 hours. This is actually kind of an interesting thing that we had talked about, which is, I think sometimes people, companies will give you this thing and they're like, okay, well, we'll just send it like, I'm available now, so I'll send it. And then, your clock starts. But I think something that's really important kind of before you even start is trying to negotiate that and saying, like, right from the beginning and saying, hey, this is actually like, I'm slammed right now. Like, I'll be able to give like an hour to this. I'm happy to do that hour and kind of send it to you at the end of this period. Or would you prefer that I kind of find a better time slot and dedicate more of that time to this task? I think asking that gives you a lot of like, I think, leverage to not like just stress out about it, like trying to fit it in, to your work. I guess that's why I wanted to ask if other people had experience, because I think this is like starting well there, taking a beat to like start well is such an important thing. Because I imagine that you probably felt stressed out throughout the whole thing as you were building this.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Yeah, which is not like a great place to be.
No.
Michael, you said you've been on like the coalition to administer a couple of these things. Would asking a question like that kind of be, I realize it's like subjective and it's probably different from team to team, but would that be frowned upon at any point? Or is that just like, hey, like we can't give you that, send that to you, but like, that's fine to ask?
Yeah, I think it's always fair to ask, especially. So when I was doing these challenges, my whole thing was like, we're sending this to them when it's convenient for us, but like it could be very inconvenient for them. And I always wanted to make sure that people had like the best opportunity to do something. And so when I was doing these, it was like we gave them like a time limit, and it was really, it really was kind of a what's it called? Like a kind of a good faith type of thing, but we tried to schedule it a little bit better. So in the same way that we would schedule a phone call, we would say like, hey, we have a 2-hour reproduction challenge that we'd like you to do. Let us know when's convenient for you, and you can like focus on this and dedicate to it. It can be any time, night or day. But what we'll do is we'll send you that challenge at the time that's convenient for you, or like half an hour before, and then you can send it to us kind of at the end of that time period. I think that's a much better way to do it. And I think, people who are thoughtful about the process will try to accomplish that. However, I think it's worth asking. And I think that doing the or is always like a powerful thing. Like if you just tell them exactly what you're able to give them and frame it like, hey, this is actually a really bad 24 hours for me with work. I wasn't anticipating getting this email and having to start right away. I have X amount of time and I'll deliver that by this period. But if you have if you have any flexibility, could I start on it at this time? And I think that, that's a fair ask.
Solid.
Yeah. So you're not saying no necessarily. You're just kind of framing the future conversations of like, this isn't going to be my best work because, I have a job, or, I have a family. I have all of these things that are preventing me from just kind of doing this assignment right when you asked me to. And I think I don't know. It's like people in those situations realize that yes, this is something that is you know, an intrusion. Like you're not getting paid for this work, and so you have to kind of prioritize it below. So that's that. I'm kind of curious. So Jacob, tell me a little bit about like the assignment. Like what are some, so as we're looking at this Figma, let me pull that back up. So we're looking at this Figma, like, is it just kind of like make as much of it as you possibly can in the time that we have, or were there other suggestions that we should probably keep in mind?
So one of the first things that as soon as I saw this, I wasn't sure, because like if you're gonna have like a list of things, I wasn't too sure on like kind of the persistent state of it, I guess you could say.
Gotcha.
So when I first built it, I was just like, I'm not even gonna attempt to attach this thing to any type of database.
Yeah.
And I just went with like local state, basically.
Gotcha.
So there's that, and then let's see, what else? And there was no really like, obviously, how many different movie categories can you look for?
Oh, sure.
So like, I just literally Googled the list, and I didn't even make sure I grabbed all the possible movie categories. I was just like, here's a small list, and I threw in some.
Yeah. It's interesting because these reproduction challenges are kind of tricky, because on one side you have the reproduction of this thing, but then you also have the interactability of this, because it's a form. There's going to be some type of interaction, and how much of that are you responsible for?
Yeah,
it is interesting.
And then the other thing too is because this is obviously just like a mobile first, I found it kind of challenging to like, well, what does it technically look like if you just open it full screen?
Sure.
Because there's different ways to approach that, and I know like in the initial email, they were like, go ahead and be creative, like add animations or all sorts of different things too as well. So I wasn't too sure on how crazy to get with it, but again, I was very stuck with the time constraint. So
totally. I always hate be creative. It's like make it pop.
Yes.
It's like too much freedom. It's like just like tell me what you want me to do. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to, if you don't mind me taking the first step, I thought it'd be kind of fun for these reproduction things. Something that I think is probably the most important thing is just getting the shape of everything right. And I know that that's really hard to do when you're bouncing back and forth between these. So something that I often do is I will just export whatever frame it is and try to load it as a background image into the space that I'm working in. So I'm not even sure if we can do that in a code sandbox. So this will really be, if that's the case, then I'm just gonna ruin everything. But let's see. So we're gonna export this one and see if we can upload it somewhere. Let's see.
One of the designers I was working with when he was testing the results, he was firing up his Photoshop, putting one screenshot and then making it 50% opacity, putting the other, and immediately seeing everything.
Yeah. I think it can be helpful. I've seen a couple people who do UI reproduction regularly on YouTube or Twitch use the same technique, and I think it's incredibly valuable. I realized I'm not even sure if we can do this in Code Sandbox. Let's try it. Let's just try.
You want to set it as a body's background image?
Yeah, I'm seeing if we can.
That up arrow says upload.
Oh man.
If you hover over that up arrow right next to the new file.
Okay,
oh, there
cool.
you go.
Yeah. I think I just got it. So let's just do this. Let's just rename this challenge. What format was it? PNG? PRG. My code sandbox is.
PRG?
What was that?
What's PRG?
Oh no, it's just an accident. Cold fingers.
Oh, I thought I'm missing something.
So let's see. So we could use an inline style for this. And just do, what is it? Background. Oh my gosh, it's so slow. Background. Image. I'm not sure if that's like the live share thing or what. Now the question is how this URL is going to resolve.
I think you need to import the image to resolve the URLs.
Oh, import. Yeah, you're right. Okay. And then the question, can we do that? Can we do an inline one here?
Can you try the following, like import image from the URL and then put the URL there as name, variable name. Import image from challenge PNG up there.
Okay. Oh, because this is how we're, yep. Okay.
I'm not really sure if this will work for that.
Yeah, the problem that we're going to have is setting it as a background image. So I'm already messing things up. I'm curious if we can reference it by the, let's see, if we can reference it by the, kind of like a relative domain. Let me see.
No, by that variable. Try by the variable.
Okay. So I gotta change this to the inline syntax. We'll change this to image. Does it get imported as a URL string? Is that the key?
I have been doing it with SVGs. I'm not sure even if this will work.
Mm-hmm. See,
so, but I think this is the way.
This is the way.
And let me Google it, not to lie.
All right. Now, I don't actually use background a lot. I tend to use images, so I end up having to look up these properties a lot. So background size, MDN is one of my favorite resources of all time. So background size, I don't exactly, so let's go jump back to our Figma file. We got height of 1205, width of 640. Let's see if adding those. The speed is killing me. So 1205. Guess I got to put these in strings, right?
Okay, you should replace the quote signs with the template. You can.
I see it.
You see it? I'm not seeing it. Let's see.
Yeah, it's there.
Let's see what we get from. It's just recompiling. Oh, hey. There it is. I just mix up the dimensions, it looks like. 640 1205. And is it Makar or
Makar? Yeah.
Makar. Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks for doing that. I always forget that these imports import a URL like a string, and so that's really great. So that's how we get the string. Now, why my background image is doing this? So background side. Maybe I need to put a couple more of these properties in here. It's been a minute.
You can try just contain for now.
Yeah.
Make sure it's covering full height.
And I think what I need to do is actually set the size here.
Also, background repeat, no repeat is necessary here.
Oh my gosh, go. 640. Alrighty. Cool. I think we finally got it. And opacity. Actually, we don't want to do that there because that'll affect the whole thing. Okay. Now this is gigantic. I wonder if I can zoom out a little bit. That's fine. So let's see. Is there a background? Color.
Background opacity?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Can't seem to find it.
No, there's no such thing.
Okay, cool. So we got this, and now we can kind of like start like putting things, like overlaying things into place. Where was the first part that you started with this, Jacob?
Trying to remember here. I think I just was from the header down.
Okay.
So I just got the screen it set in place and then started with the forms.
Okay, cool.
Or the form element.
All right, so we got screen it on there. If I put, let's see, let me make sure that this is, whoops. Oh my gosh. This speed is going to kill me. Okay, cool. So it is overlaying. So let's try doing something like this. Style. Oh my gosh, catch up.
Dude. I think they would look at whether or not you're setting H1.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Header.
Totally. I think that's a good catch.
Blue they have also doesn't pass color contrast. I checked. Actually made that
I was wondering. Also, the like small categories also doesn't look like it would pass color contrast requirements.
Yeah, definitely not streamed either. Okay, so let's see where this thing is. Inching it closer and closer. 48. 56. Okay. Now, so one thing that we're going to have to, like, one thing that's going to be super important to, like, the shape of this thing is actually kind of getting the right font in here. So let's pull over our font thing. Jacob, do you remember what font you ended up using as you were going through this?
No, but if you
should be in the file.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got SF Pro display.
SF Pro.
So that's going to be,
let me see.
I mean, the closest approximation is going to be like a system font, probably. Yeah, fonts for Apple. Let's see, what is this guy? SF Pro. Okay, so you can.
Seems like you can just go ahead and download it.
Yeah, download it, but then applying it could be kind of irritating in this code sandbox. So
I ended up using Source Sans Pro.
Source Sans Pro,
I believe, from Google.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, Google Fonts.
Let's see. I know that there's a UI system font. I want to see kind of how that approximates to like what we're looking at here. Font stack, CSS tricks. Let's grab that. So this is the system font file used by GitHub. There's another one used by. And then in this file, we already have a CSS image set up. So, a CSS style sheet set up. So I'd probably put these global things in the style sheet that we already have. We can kind of move these things around later.
There you go. You have the font family up there.
Yeah.
Just replace it.
I think I'm going to put it there because we don't have that class anymore.
Oh.
Okay, so let's see that. Okay, cool. So that looks, it's kind of on top of itself right now, but it looks close enough probably. I'm seeing a little bit of, it looks a little like bulkier though. So I'm kind of curious if there's like a font smoothing. Let's see. It also could be my screen because I'm working from a 1080. I'm streaming from this like 1080p screen right now.
I've noticed that if you embed Google Fonts and if you upload them and use with font face, the same fonts are tremendously different.
Yeah.
Embedded one or bulkier.
I've noticed that as well. It's super weird that happens. Do you know why? Like, is it just the fonts are different, or is there some like property that gets added?
I think they're compressing it. When you don't download them, they reference them. I don't know. It's just my assumption because I saw a huge difference.
Yeah. Now, which ones? You said one of them was bulkier, and I was curious which ones.
Yeah, the ones embedded, like we're embedding here.
Gotcha.
From Google. The same font downloaded from the same Google. It looks much smoother if you use it with font face. Interesting. Okay, so let's move this back into place, and we'll kind of find the, what was it? We were at 56 pixels, kind of put us around there, and then we'll find the font size. Flintstones. I need to figure out how to like move this processing to another computer so this thing doesn't just like die on me. Okay, so font size. Let's see, I think it defaults to 16, so let's try bumping it up to 18. Oh, sorry, no, this was the H1, right? I can never remember what the defaults are. Why bothering? Just copy from the design. It should be there. Let's see what we got.
Okay.
So one thing I've seen in my own experience working with mockups like this is that very often tools like InDesign or Figma will deal at a different resolution than the browser will. That means that even if you're using the same like font size, like the number that's provided to you by the mockup tool, it means that the end result could look very different.
Sure.
Size-wise.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think that's very true. I would agree.
Let's see. So let's see what it's telling us. So right here, the height of the element is 40. This is a text element, and then, but I'm not inspect. So it's saying the height is 48, font weight 700, normal. Oh, this is
you have the size down there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's see. It's looking a little bit off from that. So just put a debugging color in there. So it looks almost like 37 is like about where we're at. And then I assume, let's see. Puts us right about, I hate that number, but yeah, let's put it at like 52. That puts us right about like where we're supposed to be. And it looks like most of the kind of forms kind of fit into the same place. It looks like there might be a little bit of additional letter spacing, like just a tiny bit. But again, we're kind of like getting into the weeds on this. So I'd probably call this good enough pretty soon. Especially since my computer won't let me type. Letter. It doesn't look like there's any on here on the page, but I'm gonna actually, what I'm gonna do is come back to this. We'll call that good. But I'm gonna leave it in red as kind of something that I know that I want to come back to eventually. And we can kind of just like search for all like the red classes, or we could actually add a let's do this. Debug color. Okay, so we'll have this class, and we can put this in everywhere, and then we can search for this class or just delete the class if we want to towards the end of this thing. So we'll add a class name. Cool. So now, if I take that red off, good. Okay, so I think probably the next big thing is going to be getting these large swaths of. So we have the text, the style of text that we want to use. Presumably, this is the same throughout. Not entirely sure, but I guess we'll find out. It seems like the next thing that we might want to do is actually block off these sections. That would probably be the next thing that I reach for.
I would do the container first.
Yeah. Like this outside container?
Yeah, and it's padding.
Yeah. So the
overall frame.
The thing I'm kind of curious about this, which is interesting, is that like, is this illustrating that this is like a mobile app, or is it like something that's going to show up as like a card on the web? But I think we could probably do it nonetheless, because at least in Figma they make it really easy, right?
Yeah. I think in real life it would have its desktop version, but here I would just set a max width for it to keep it the same. Just maybe why max width? So it would be still visible for narrower screens.
Sure. Let's see. So this is our container up here. Now, I know one thing that's always kind of like a big deal is like kind of, you know, naming of things and whatnot. And this can be kind of overwhelming. So I kind of try not to think about it too early on. And I will just put a bunch of like to-dos like everywhere. In this first pass, though, like I'm usually just kind of getting like a general shape of a thing. Let's see. So let's put another div here.
See, this is super interesting to me because, like, my initial reaction to this was like I wanted to get like the when I saw the screen, like I wanted to get the markup out of the way as fast as possible. Like I knew there would be like an H1 and a form with like buttons and stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
get that done first and then make it like fit the design. So seeing like that kind of different approach is super interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think that we could probably like do a mix of them. I'm totally happy to give that a try. I wonder if this is kind of getting messed up because so like at this point I'd probably stop trying to do this just because it's like I don't know exactly what's contributing to all these factors, and I would jump back into just kind of like getting some of this stuff, the spaces of it all mixed up, marked up. All right, so we have a couple of sections, and I'm curious how they kind of set these up. So we have, it seems, a general padding, which we've already applied to everything. You kind of have to make some game day decisions on like if you want the padding on everything. Like this, now that I'm looking at this, it looks like this is going to have to extend to the edges. So that padding should be, even though there's a visual padding around this whole thing that seems uniform, we really can't have that padding over the whole app. We need it over our sections. So let's move that out. And then I think this is something. So Jacob, I'm curious at this point, like this is kind of like where you kind of decide, am I going to double down on like React components for this stuff or like CSS? Do you have a leaning given the like instructions that you had?
No. Yeah, they didn't state whether I should break it out into components, but like just my personal initial reaction would be to just kind of have the form built into this.
Okay.
And then have separate components for like the list of movies.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think that's actually how the approach I took.
Okay. Cool.
Whereas I guess you could technically break out the form as a component too.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, let's do this then. Let's just do a let's see. What would be, you know, I'm going to, because I get so hung up on naming, I'm just going to keep doing this inline. So what we want to do is we want to move this padding rule out so that it doesn't come to bite us in the ass when we start doing these, which extend their full width. So this should move that out back into the corner. I guess since we're talking about semantic markup and whatnot, is section like a better rule for dividing up these things? Or a better tag?
I think it's too small for a section. The entire thing is a section.
Okay.
I could see. So for me, like if this is the whole page, I would have everything wrapped in a main. Mm-hmm. That main would have an H1 followed by a form, followed by maybe a section, but probably an unordered list. And the unordered list would have list items, and each list item would have probably an article, would be my thought.
Okay. So we're looking at, so we have...
Or it could just be a bunch of articles without the trappings of the list. Either of those would be acceptable, I think.
Okay. Okay, cool. I am now, so I did kind of like a silly thing where I like put all the styles on the H1, and because an H1 has its own styling, now it's getting pushed down, so that's irritating. Let me add another class real quick. I like what you were talking about with the markup there. So maybe we'll add those sections just as placeholders. And then
For sure.
Jacob, did you want to like, one of the big things is I wanted to kind of like start doing like kind of that background image type of thing. Did you want to start building out any of these features?
I can. I can.
Okay. No stress. I just wanted
what if
to...
I tackle? No, I can make the list component.
Yeah, sure. Let's do that.
I'll just do a new file.
Yeah, hey guys, I've kind of been a fly on the wall, but this approach to like exact markup replication is super interesting because I've had my fair share of alt tab, but literally putting it in the background and having it overwrite is pretty super interesting. Taking it to a whole other extreme.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I mean, you definitely see pretty quickly where you're off base, which I find kind of nice. Because yeah, alt tabbing and like finding properties and whatnot is a little bit frustrating. Okay, debug background color. So let's put this on all of these. Let's So we have, what do we have here? We have our heading section. So let's actually call this header. I feel like I might take a tip from your book there, Ben, and do the live share in Code Sandbox, because this is just brutal.
Oh, yeah, because you're seeing me.
Oh, interesting.
My errors.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay, so we wrapped it in a main. We have a header, and then I guess, what did you say for the kind of like the form? Should we just put that in a form, or should we wrap it in like a div or whatnot?
Easier without a form.
And then we can have like a unordered list. We'll just have some placeholders here. Okay. So we're going to put that class name on here of debug color. You're right, debug background color. Okay, so now we need to get kind of an approximate height and stuff. So let's start mixing in these form elements. Let's see. Input type. Oh my gosh. Now, right now, oftentimes you can kind of like wrap these labels like around these things, but I think that given the nature of this, it might be kind of tricky because we'll probably move these around with CSS Grid. In which case, I'm not exactly sure what the end artifact is gonna like kind of where we're going to need to move these elements around. So let's add a label for that. And we'll use
If you don't wrap, you also need to define IDs.
Yep.
That's why it's less ID.
Let's see. So this is going to be our name, right? Type text. Put a placeholder in there, which is name of movie. Okay, so we have this. We're seeing that fuchsia because it's kind of on the background of our whole section. Theoretically, if I click on this, I should be able to. Oh, I didn't put the name in there. So I got to link these up. So HTML4 name, ID, name. Okay, cool. So now clicking that will focus that. So these things are attached, and that's a decent way to test that. Okay, cool. So that is attached. Let's do the other one. So this is going to be category. Oops.
This is a select option, right? Not an input.
Yep, you're right. Okay. Oh my gosh, do your thing. And then that's going to be ID, category. Now this actually gets into, Jacob, what you were talking about earlier, like how many of these categories are we going to have, where we're going to get this data from. My inclination on these is just to like kind of only present the options that are represented in the mockup, and then kind of just like, I don't know, figure it out later. Was someone about to say something? I thought I heard a voice.
Yeah, I was just about to say that you've misspelled category in the select ID.
Thank you.
I guess it's not even important how many items you put there as options.
Yeah, probably
it's
not.
just important that you have just important to have the mapping to an array, and to have the array somewhere visible so that you would know that it can be easily modified.
Yep, totally. I totally agree. So if that's the case, then let's just put one of these in here, and we'll not really like worry about it after that. So we have select category. We can click on that. That'll activate that. Thank you, Ben, for correcting my spelling. And then now we have comedy in there. I guess I'm going to add one more just so we can make sure that it works, which will be drama. Cool. Comedy, drama. Okay, those things are set in place. Now, let's kind of like take this and figure out the size of, let's see. What time is it? Oh my gosh, it's already been an hour. It's amazing how fast the time goes with this. So let's go back to our shape. So if we go back to this form element, again, we see that this is already nested inside of our padding. So we're going to have to put some kind of padding around that. We used 52 up here before, so I'm just going to copy and paste that from this section. Yank. Paste. Okay, cool. So we can see that this now goes to the edges of our box, but it's putting it inside so it kind of lines up with this item, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to just kind of put these on different lines real quick. Nope, that didn't work. Put it in the wrong place. Okay, cool. So that's kind of like the shape of this thing that we want. Let's see what the... Okay, so the padding, we actually don't necessarily want it on the top and bottom. We just want it on these sides. So let's take it off the top. Pixels, let's see, top is going to be that value. Okay, cool. Now that aligns where we need it to be. Now, I think that probably, and I'd love to get people's feedback on this, it seems to me like the best fit for like this type of UI is going to be like a two column grid. Actually, I just realized that I didn't get rating in there.
I would put a flex instead.
A flat. Okay. Why so?
Each line could be a flex of 2 items.
But
actually,
they wouldn't match up.
Reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for that reason, I usually wrap with label, and label becomes my flex element.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I've not used that before. I'm going to add, sorry, just real quick, I'm going to add one more thing. Let's put another label down here. This is a big open question for me of like how we're going to handle that. And I'd love people's feedback. Like if you think about like kind of what is this star, like what is the form element underneath that could represent this star? Or is it just like 5 buttons with that kind of like set a state? I'm super curious.
I've been thinking about exactly this problem for like a month now, and that's mainly because I've used a like rating widget from Semantic UI React, and its approach is basically these are 5 buttons, and the reason it does that is because very often with ratings like this, you want to be able to like click again on the spot where you're at, and it would like clear the rating away. So maybe that's a question I would ask the interviewers, like, what is the expected interaction here? Like, do I know whether the rating is required? Is rating clearable? That kind of behavior. But if it's not clearable, then it actually strikes me a lot as like radio buttons.
Oh, interesting.
Right,
because you can't select 3 and 5, right? You could select 3 or 5 or 4 or right, like interesting.
And plus, like, as a radio group, you get a couple of other benefits of like, for instance, if we say that this is 5 buttons, then that means you're adding 5 items to the focus order.
Okay.
Like you have to tab through each of the 5 stars. Whereas if you say it's a radio group, then now the whole widget is a single focusable entity, and you get to take advantage of built-in roving tab index behavior so that you can do like arrow keys to switch between the different stars. So that's kind of where I've been landing on rating widgets. But that all kind of comes down to whether the end behavior is that ratings are expected to be required and also not clearable, because you can't clear a radio group.
Interesting.
I actually made such a component about 2 months ago.
Okay.
It turns out you need to take care of a lot of things. It's not only setting or clearing, you also have the hovering state. And yeah, I think that's already a lot.
Yeah. You really
because the hovering should calculate where you are and like deem all the ones before to the left.
Interesting. Yeah. So, right. So this kind of like goes into like kind of like what is your anticipation for like what this UI is going to do? Like, so and you're saying is that as you kind of hover over them, there's going to be some type of response that's going to hover all of the items. Like, so if I hover over here, I should see all of these be yellow.
I don't see your pointer, but
sorry.
yeah, I'm sure that's we're talking about the same thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so I'm curious, Ben, with that, because that does make it kind of difficult, right? Like with a radio group.
Yeah, it does. I've been toying around with like a progressive enhancement approach to this, but at the same time, like especially if you're doing like a UI reproduction, like I'm not sure progressive enhancement is like the best way to go, right? Like I think you kind of want to optimize for fast in that case. So
yeah,
maybe we just do it like buttons and have a bunch of states.
Okay, cool.
I was gonna say too, I did create a rating component. If you want to go ahead and import that.
Oh yeah. Let's see it. So it's over here.
It's just SVGs.
Oh, cool! Look at you. Well, I was sleeping. Look what you did. This is pretty cool. So did you guide us through that process a little bit? So did you pull these from the Figma file?
Yeah.
What are these?
Nice. Okay, so let's see. So we have, let's open up this Figma file real quick. We have these stars. If I can get into them. Okay, so we got a little star frame. And I assume that if you inspect that, you get a little bit of CSS. So were you able to just copy and paste this from here?
If you right click and do the copy, I just did a copy as SVG and then did a HTML to JSX conversion. There's like an online tool that you can do it real quick.
Cool. Yeah, and this is
but why do you even need to convert it?
Because of class names.
Yeah.
Because when you copy it, all the attributes are HTML by default. So
yeah, we'll show you. So one of the things that kind of let's see if we can get there. This doesn't seem to have a lot of them. So one of the challenges with SVGs, Makar, is that no, ViewBox is right. There are a number of properties that I can't remember at the moment, but there are a number of them that will have like a dash in the middle, which won't translate to JSX in React, or they might have like a colon.
But my question is, I'm very sorry for interrupting, but the question is more general. Like, why don't you just save it as an SVG and then import it as an SVG and use just like you used the PNG?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So go into here, kind of do this, hit like the export or make it exportable, and then save it as a SVG. Yeah, I think that either approach is like totally valid. I think the nice thing about this is that you're able to kind of manage it in code. I think that probably what we'll see is in having it in code is that we'll be able to change this fill really quickly. So we can use JSX to change the color of this right in here instead of having like two PNGs or two SVGs or two PNGs, two images.
No. You can still do that. You can still do that while importing it as an SVG file.
Mm-hmm.
With CSS, you can set the fill through CSS and it will work.
Yeah.
So the idea is, like, rather than having this D equal to Chinese in your code, you could just keep it separate as an image, while having this advantage of filling it.
Sure. Yep, I think there's like a number. Why does this say ratings deleted from disk? That's interesting. I think there's a number of approaches that we could take with this, and I think it would probably depend on your like kind of comfort and like personal preference, I guess.
Yeah, it's my very personal preference to have
to
as
pull it
short
in as
as
a file.
possible, everything.
Yep, I hear that. Let's okay, so we have that rating. So this is, I think, one thing that I wanted to kind of, in terms of questions, because I want this to be kind of like valuable in terms of, I guess, how do you process out a feature, like whether it be with your PM or like an interview or like whatnot? How do you ask, like, kind of how do you ask questions? And so one of the things that I always find important is, like, as you're doing work, just keeping some type of like note sheet available to yourself of the questions that you want to ask about, like, where you have areas of like trade-offs. Because I think that together we raised a lot of interesting questions about this thing, which is like totally unclear. Because, you know, if we have this thing, is it clearable? In this presentation of the UI as it stands right now, this isn't a clearable thing. There's no way to select 0 stars. So do we solve that by having a, you know, kind of a clear button that shows up once you've made a selection? Do we have some kind of UI that like clears this, you know, like a clear form button that appears? Does the add movie button kind of become like 2 buttons and like one of them's a cancel? Like, there's a lot of things that are kind of unknown about this UI at the moment. And so I feel like these are really good opportunities to kind of demonstrate that you're thinking about the whole problem, and not just like the code in front of you. And so I keep track of these, and I would send these along with like whatever my response is. Like, hey, I noticed that this form, the stars aren't clear. Like, none of the form elements are clearable. One thing that I would like to know before like proceeding is, what's the intent on the design for how these things should be cleared? Because I think, and then mention, like, I think that that's going to impact how we handle the markup itself. You know, if we want these to be hoverable per se, we'll probably implement them with buttons. If we want them to be kind of like most accessible out of the box on day one, you know, then maybe we'll kind of go with like a, you know, a radio group or whatnot. But these questions really help the interviewer or the PM or whatever understand that you are really trying to understand the whole problem.
It's actually a really good point, because I thought about that while you guys were I think talking about the rating, because there's a lot of questions about it. So I was like, well, if we ask questions about the time frame, would it be bad to ask questions about specific approaches? But I like that approach of sending it as, all right, I finished it, here's more questions that I have. So
yeah, I think it's a powerful approach, like whether it's like with a, you know, in a job or an interview situation, because I think that managers are really resistant to like extending the timeline of something before any of the work has happened, right? Like, this is very much like the nature of a manager, is like, show me the thing that I asked for, and then we can have a conversation about it. And I think that this, because you're in a situation where you don't have the luxury, like, I think interviews really press into not having the luxury to be able to just kind of ping pong ideas back and forth. And so keeping this note sheet is like, you know, can be really helpful. Cool. I'm kind of curious. So we've already hit an hour. It's always amazing to me, like, how quick this time goes. I'm curious. I don't want anyone to have to feel like kind of like compelled to stick around. But I'd like to keep kind of like poking at this a little bit. And I'm curious, you know, if there are things, you know, we might not be able to get to. I mean, we're definitely not going to be able to get to all of it without spending an amount of time on it. I'm curious if there are things that you really wanted to see fleshed out, and if we could tackle those maybe pretty quickly. Like, or things that you had kind of questions about, whether they be like on the React side or the, you know, kind of some of the gotchas sides of things, etc.
yeah, I mean, I'm curious, what would there be another approach to keeping track of the list of movies that were added outside of state?
let's see, movies that were added outside of one more time, sorry.
So like when you add a movie, obviously the way that I approached it before was I just did it in context and state.
Okay.
Would there be a different way or a better way to kind of almost make it very curious, like this isn't even connected to a database, but like would local storage be a easy choice to
good question,
to store that data, and that way if they do refresh they're like, oh okay, it's persistent, but it's kind of a hidden persistent.
Yeah, so I think my inclination is to like, I think it depends on like how the challenge was expressed, like if it's expressed like, and also the role at play, right? It sounds like this is kind of like a front end designer, or like designer front end engineer type of thing. Is that about right?
Yeah.
I think if that's the case, I wouldn't worry too much about trying to hook it up to a backend. And I might even put that in the kind of follow-ups, right? Or like questions for the interviewer. I think that there is a tendency to try to maybe go into like, oh, okay, can I persist this in local storage? And I don't think, at least from my perspective, I don't think that's going to matter a ton, because chances are like the interviewer isn't worried about if you can put it in local storage, because there's going to be some mechanism when you're on the job where you like actually know how to like hit the API and like get that data. They're a little bit more worried about, can you present everything? Again, that's role dependent. So that's really for this kind of like front end reproduction side of things. But I think it's probably worth asking. I think that you could demonstrate your curiosity about it as a next step, as like a follow-up question, like, so like in your product stack, do you like, what does data access look like? And you could even kind of flesh that out a little bit, like, REST API, GraphQL, other, etc. I think that's a way to demonstrate that you are curious about it without having to spend, like an hour trying to hook up like a custom hook to make sure that it connects to, because that is definitely like a rabbit hole that you could like get sucked into of like, how do I do this? And it's not actually going to provide a lot of value in terms of like your interviewing experience, maybe.
Yeah. That's true, because I almost wonder if that's a rabbit hole that I did fall down, where like if I just made the UI look like just basically all the options that they gave you in that list in the Figma file.
Yep.
If I just hard coded that, if that would have been a better approach.
Yeah.
There's an easy workaround for you. So like in real life, it's gonna be sent to an API, right? So if you, on one side, if you start your storage from a hard-coded file, a JSON file, and on the other hand, if you send it through the network anywhere, just send it to nowhere. You will have this payload in your network tab. You can easily copy from there and then replace your hard-coded file with that one. And here, A, you can replace your starter file, and B, you can demonstrate that you can send this data over an API to an API.
That is interesting. Yeah, like it'd be hard in this kind of situation where like maybe you have a code sandbox that isn't set up with like a network. But if you did have a starter, maybe you could do that. That definitely feels kind of like challenge specific. Like if it was a full stack role, that definitely feels like a good direction to go. But like maybe for a front end thing, maybe, just kind of working with a JSON. I really like what you were saying, like kind of having the JSON in a separate file to demonstrate like how you would expect the data to come back, as opposed to just having it, as a variable. That does sound really interesting too.
I can say where I went to and fell into a huge rabbit hole. I tried one time to hook another app. Like this was a React app, and I also had a Node.js app in the same folder.
Yeah.
And because React cannot save files, I was sending from React to Node.js and then saving with Node.js.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a huge rabbit hole because it's not so easy to connect the two. There is this cross-reference error popping up.
Yeah.
And you need to set up a proxy for both of them to work.
Yeah.
But totally agreed. It's a big rabbit hole. Avoid rabbit holes.
Yeah, I feel like with these challenges, one of the biggest things is really just avoiding rabbit holes, because what happens is and I know that this is like, for me, what ends up happening is I'll be like, oh, okay, well, these parts of the assignment are really easy. I want to show off. And so I'm going to do something that looks like maybe more interesting, but isn't directly the thing. And so then I start doing this thing and I realize that thing is pretty hard. And then I start running out of time. And then I realize that the assignment itself, has some gotchas and is harder than I expected. And am just like, now I'm stuck, right? I got like an hour left on the clock and I have like 2 hours invested in this thing that's going to not end up panning out, and then kind of haven't really done the reproduction side of it really well. And I think, avoiding rabbit holes is a really big, a big challenge.
Yeah, it almost sounds like if you might be more beneficial to take like 5 minutes and kind of just think about those things, like what kind of role this is for.
Yes.
Look for any gotchas. Because like the ratings, I think that was something that also got me as well. I feel like if I looked at it and thought about it, I didn't even think about from an accessibility standpoint, and I should have, because that's not your typical form element. So
yeah, it's so easy to overlook. I mean, like I didn't think about it until, because you see all the parts that you see and you're like, oh, this is easy, and you think about it as presentation, but then, I mean, I totally overlooked rating, and I was like, oh crap, like what is that element going to be?
But at the same time, like I think those kinds of things are really interesting because they make a great way to differentiate yourself from like other people, right? Like it not to say, like, I'm not like shaming y'all at all for like not thinking through the accessibility stuff. Like, it's just that's my instinct, right? And so like the fact that those are the questions I would be asking, as opposed to other people who are asking about like the data layer, where it's like, I'm like, I don't really care about the data layer. That's not what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the accessibility stuff. So it's a good way to distinguish yourself, I think, in those cases, is by the questions you're asking.
Totally. 1000%. Because I think that, it's really easy to be like, you do the best you can and you send it off as kind of this, closed box back to the interviewer. But I think something that's really important, whether it be like a PM or like interview or whatnot, is like you want to demonstrate to them in a very quick way that you're thinking about the problem, because they're thinking about like 5 different things. Like they're thinking about maybe like 10 other people who have like interviewed for this role, and like they just got 10 code sandboxes. And so like a way to differentiate yourself, as Ben is saying, is raising questions that show that you're thinking about the thing in a different way. And I feel like these either or type of situations are really great. And I think that it makes it easy for someone to see like, oh, this is someone that I could work with because I'm busy and they've presented me with 2 options. But in those 2 options, they selected the one that they thought was probably best, but know that it might change. So when I say, hey, this actually has to change because of X, Y, and Z that we didn't represent in the mock-up, like they're not going to be like kind of like thrown into a tizzy on that type of thing. Jacob, I think what you were saying was really, really important. And I think that this is another thing that I would probably try to define when working this out, is like, who am I building this as? Because if this is, kind of a front-end designer, you can kind of, you're really going for things like, was it reproduction? Like quality, you're going to be going for like accessibility. I'm not even going to try to type that. So you're going to go for accessibility. You're going to demonstrate markup. I don't know why I chose to put demonstrate on that one, but markup is going to be an important thing. And I guess probably like command of like JavaScript and React. So you're going to want to focus on those things. If this is like a full on, full stack role, then yeah, you might want to kind of limit the amount of time that you spend thinking about production, like reproduction, and start thinking about, okay, how am I going to demonstrate that I can connect the pieces between like Node, API, and front end, and giving an example that demonstrates all of those things is probably going to benefit you like significantly more. I imagine that a full stack challenge probably wouldn't have like a UI presented like this, and they might have some kind of starter where you add a feature. But I think that that's a pretty good demonstration of like how this would probably change based on that role. Yeah.
Jacob, have you sent it already, or we're actually eating up your 24 hours?
No, yeah, this happened a while ago.
Good.
To get a month ago or something. So
I'm curious from your experience there, what did you learn from that experience, having kind of gone through this process, set it up, sent it, and like what did you learn?
Well, first thing and foremost is if I'm pressed for time, ask for more. I think that's my biggest takeaway, because at the time, me and my wife took the day off, and we actually had to go. We're getting a house built, so we had to do the whole showroom thing, and there was no time. So that's the biggest thing. And then I think the other important thing that has stuck out is to really to focus on what type of role it's for, because I think that will help tremendously, because there's another, I think it was a full stack role, I'm not even sure, where I had to use the Star Wars API and basically like almost create like a search index type of app, where it just queried for different Star Wars information and stuff, and that one was more full stack, and I had like 3 days to do it, so I had more time, but it was a full stack with an API that was already ready. But I think there was that caveat of do I kind of set up with my own Node backend in a sense, or do I, what approach do I take there? So I think focusing on the actual role and what the goals are in that role are important as well.
Totally. Yeah, I think that those are like such important takeaways, because like kind of as we discovered, like things just take so much more time than you think, and so like kind of going for that like minimum baseline and then extending later is important. And I think also it comes across to like, it's important to remember that these people are looking for someone who is communicative and is like thinking through the process, and they'll be able to like rely on. And I think that that's like demonstrating, there's ways to demonstrate all of these things through the process that make it clear that those, even if you don't get every single part, like every single gotcha or whatever, demonstrating that you like have the capability to communicate well and be thoughtful is such an important part of the process. Cool.
Yeah,
And then
I think those are the two biggest takeaways.
Nice.
Yeah, on one hand, you need to not assume much things. If you have questions, you should ask. And on the other hand, you should respect your peers' time and not ask questions that are too obvious.
Yep. Yeah, good practices for just general team workflow and whatnot. Michael G, I saw your question in here. I actually just added both you and Ben. So this is what the Code Sandbox UI for live sharing looks like. Basically, as soon as you click into this tab, it will start a new live share session. Jacob and I found that when we had started one a couple days ago just to see how it worked, and but that session ended, and so we had to create a new one for today, even though it's the same Code Sandbox. So I don't know, FYI. There's some features that you can enable classroom mode. That's kind of cool. Oh, interesting. So I had to approve you all as viewers, but it looks like I could probably just do everyone can edit, and so then now anyone who joins this is able to do the thing, which is cool.
Yeah, I think it's super cool how we could just, whether it's VS Code or Code Sandbox, just all like, it's the perfect thing for what we're doing. Just all hop in and just spin something up. Yeah, totally. I think one thing that I did want to kind of demonstrate on the kind of how you could work this with I guess illustrating that that data is going to come from somewhere, but you don't want to work on that. You don't want to touch that side of it. Is you could probably just handle that with naming, right? Sample server categories. And then kind of use that as, kind of basically mock that out and use this variable anywhere so that when they're reviewing your code, it's very clear in the name that you just see this as sample data, and that this would kind of eventually come from a server when you were able to, hook it up that way. You could even if you wanted to get real crazy and do some kind of blank states or error states, and you wanted to handle those, you could even wrap this in a promise and wait for it or whatever. But these are all things that you would probably do at those later stages, when you feel really good with your reproduction of the thing.
Yeah. Sure. Cool.
I like to make those fake promises at the very beginning, because promises complicate your code a bit. You need to think about this asynchronous stuff.
Yeah.
Better take care of that straight away. But on the other hand, it slows down so much. Those half seconds, 1 seconds,
yeah,
they end up eating up a lot of time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is a good point between the difference between kind of an interview process and a development process, because I totally 100% agree with you. When I'm just doing local development for a product, I love starting with the broken state, the failed promise or the really slow promise, and working up from there, because it is more, it's more robust, and your user, instead of adding that stuff on later, handling it from default. That's really good advice. All right. Well, we didn't actually get very far for all the time, but I think that we covered a lot of really good tips for interacting with managers and interview processes and whatnot for those who are on the hunt right now. I am curious if there's anything before we kind of wrap up, if there's anything that any other questions that anyone had that they wanted to ask, or kind of get the group thoughts on. And then if not, you can kind of just play with the reproduction of this thing on your own and kind of see where you go. I would love to see kind of what you end up with. It's a good little exercise. There's a lot of really cool little nuggets in there. All right. We're good? Cool. Hey, thanks everybody for being here. Jacob, I really appreciate you opening up about your experience and your process and letting us kind of go through this whole thing together. And it's been super fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for letting me join in here.
Yeah. Anytime. And honestly, there's so much here that I think it'd be kind of fun to just maybe another time just kind of walk through, focus on just this star component or something like that, and kind of go through the different, Makar was saying, the different
options for the SVGs. We could try the inline one, try the loaded one, and see how they differ. Using CSS or whatnot. I think this could be there's so much here. We could spend a day probably just on this rating component.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks all. I'm really grateful for your time. I'm glad that we got to work on this. I hope that it was useful, that there was some useful nuggets in here for you. And I hope that you have a great day. I think this is one of the last things that we'll probably do before the year ends, so it might be quiet. But I hope that you have kind of a great end of the year / holiday season / Christmas. And yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of running into 2021 with y'all. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.